Hello and welcome back to another episode of Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, from which Craig Touch and myself, Roland Hume, chat to some of the interesting figures and leading lights in this crazy industry we're in of writing and self-publishing. And today we are delighted to have a guest who I'm quite familiar with. I've worked with before. I think she's wonderful. Leah Busboom, who's written a plethora of books. Isn't plethora a good word? I like that one. And she has come here to talk to us all about the murky navigating of genres and things like that. I'm sure Craig will be able to put it much better than I could just then. So speaking of that, first of all, Leah, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, we are delighted to have you. And of course, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Touch, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems and an author himself. How are you doing today, Craig?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Roland. Thank you for joining us, Leah. Yeah, we were talking about the idea of writing against genre when Leah and I were talking about doing this podcast, and she has a story to tell about what she has done in that area and how well it. Or try to figure out, what we can learn from that, and just overall discuss, the idea of sticking to, one genre, one subgenre, what the ramifications are of branching out and trying something different. It really depends. Obviously, some people will have different experiences, but hearing one person's experience is often a good indication of at least one path that you might end up going down. So let's jump into that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the books you've written, the genre you're normally in, and then sort of use that as a springboard into sort of what happened when you experimented a bit.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm a romance writer, and the broad category is romance. Most of the books I've written are, in fact, all except for the one I'm going to talk about, is contemporary romance or romantic comedies, rom-coms, so to speak. And it just occurred to me one day that, gee, wouldn't it be cool if I wrote a time travel romance? Had no experience doing that. And, I kind of think that authors in the back of their mind have this impression that if we write it, they will come, kind of a thing, right? Oh, I could write anything. I could, everybody will read it. So I wrote this time travel romance, and really enjoyed writing the thing, and had a really, good time doing that. But after I wrote it, I sort of paused and thought, okay, how do I market this, right? And let me explain kind of the full part of it. She's a country music star. So we've got, this rock star thing, but it's country music star. Then we have, she didn't intend to have this happen. She accidentally goes back to 1855 and she meets this guy that she falls in love with. So I've got almost half the novel is written trying to depict what life would be like in 1855. And a lot of the reviews have said, woo, I'm glad I don't live in 1855. Because, it was a lot of research. I was afraid I'd write about something that wasn't even invented, right? So you had to do a lot of research about that. Well, she falls in love with him, but she does not fall in love with the time period, right? It's like, oh, I hate it here. This is awful. I don't have my cell phone. I mean, it's that kind of a thing. So they figure out how to get her back. And, you just have to kind of suspend your belief system on, is it time travel really possible? But anyway, she goes back. And then the book keeps going with the guy and talks about the rest of his life. There's a couple chapters on that. And then he sets this plan in motion to get her together with his great grandson. Well, wow. Yeah. And it's kind of a cool thing he passes this box down over time through his family, and it has the book that she read when she was with him. And before she leaves, she throws him this locket. The locket's in the box too. Very rusty, very bad looking, you know. So the grandson in current time, he's not invested at all in getting her this box, right? But he does. And they fall in love. So I've got this very odd story in a way because A, it's a time travel. B, it's a historical romance and a contemporary romance all at once, right? And she doesn't end up with the original guy. And I've got some fairly scathing reviews over that. You know, in romance, it's usually, okay, she meets the guy, she falls in love with the guy, right? Well, she did that, but she went back to her current time frame and he didn't come with. And that was explored in the book too as to why he didn't go along. But, you know, he just didn't feel like he could. So then she ends up with this other guy, which I think is, I kind of like that. But, you know, that's really writing against the romance, how romances are written, right? I just totally broke the rules. It's kind of like the rule that everyone says, don't kill the dog. Mm-hmm. It's the same kind of thing, right? The guy who she fell in love with in 1855, that ends up, I even write about his death. You know, he dies because, you know, he's way back there in time. And the grandson, while I wrote him, I thought, attractive and everything, people were still readers were still a little bit hung up on the original guy. Why didn't she end up? Why didn't she just go, you know, some magic occur and they end up together, right? Oh, I feel like my book was realistic in that, other than time travel, whether you could do that or not. But it probably would be realistic that you wouldn't like that time period. You wouldn't want to live there. And so you were willing to give up the love of your life, go back to your current time frame, and still you can fall in love with someone else. That's not an impossible thing.
No.
I mean, people do, don't they? In real life, people have
exactly.
Right.
But what I've learned, the hard lesson is romance readers don't really want to deal with real life.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So here I am with this book to try to market it. When people read it, other than the ones who want her to end up with the original guy, most people say, oh, I really do like this story. But I've very much narrowed my niche down to 10 readers versus hundreds of readers, right? Accidentally, didn't know I was doing that. Let me give another example. So I signed up for this promotion via Book Funnel, and I put it in the historical romance promotion. I thought, well, maybe this is where I find my readers, right? They really love this thing. I got kicked out of the promotion because it wasn't a historical romance in the true. So see, I don't fit in any category. Even trying to figure out my Kindle categories has been a struggle. What
Especially
am I?
Since they've changed everything around as well.
Well, yeah, you only have 3 now.
Well, okay, so there is actually, I was just looking, there is a Kindle ebooks romance time travel.
There is. Okay.
So I wouldn't say that, you've limited your potential readers too much, because, if you look at the rankings of the one in the first spot, and that
is it Outlander?
Is that number? No, it's I don't know. It's called Blast from the Past.
Okay.
And it's number 1 in time travel romance, but it's number 88 in the whole Kindle store. And the next one is Delighting Her Highland Devil, but that's book 7 of a series, and that's 1,520 in the Kindle store. So I mean, there are readers, but I think Outlander's number 3 there, and number 4.
Yeah.
But I think that there's actually in that case, my guess is there's a couple other things going on there. One thing in particular that jumps out to me is romance readers typically like the HEA, the happily ever after ending. And I know that you say that, there is one for her at least. They want it with the couple, like the original couple, right? Mm-hmm. So And then there's also the idea of, multiple partners, not that she was cheating or whatever, because they don't like that, but, the idea that so, I mean, I don't know, I haven't read the book, but is it like, is there just a whole romance with her and the first guy, and then another whole romance with her and the grandson, or yeah, so then it's kind of like, who do they root for?
I know that. But see, it didn't dawn on me. I'm busy writing the book. But let me talk to the time travel thing. What I find, this is a clean and wholesome book. All right, there's one strike against it in that time travel category. If you look at those, a lot of those are really steamy, especially Outlander, right? Very, very steamy. That readership seems to expect that a little bit more than the clean and wholesome. I had a lady read it and she said, "Oh, I just love this book, but I wished it was steamier." So, it's just so funny. I think authors need to think about it. It's sort of like you write the book and then you figure out how to market it, right? Maybe you should back up and think about that first, because it doesn't really fit in any of those niches. And her falling in love with that first guy must have done a really great job in that part of the book, because a lot of people are rooting for him, right? Well, he doesn't go back with her, and the grandson is the one she ends up falling in love with. Now, a lot of people end up saying, "Oh, that's cool. That's neat how that ended up," because it really did send him to her. I don't think those two would have ever met each other, the grandson and her, if he hadn't dreamed up this hand down this box over time thing. And what he put in it was so meaningful for her, right? This locket that she had left him, and she knew that he always thought about her. And then his love really did sort of span the bounds of time. That was kind of my theme with that, right?
Yeah.
But readers still, they can really be hard on you, you know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They like what they like, right?
I've experienced the same thing. When I started writing romance, I wrote, there's a British author called Gilly Cooper, and her book's called Bonk Busters, because everyone was always jumping into bed with everyone else. So I wrote one of that, and everyone was like, "Oh my goodness, you can't have the characters cheating." That's like, and I realized, yeah, no cheating.
Right. No cheating, no any of that. Not that she cheated, right? She didn't. But there's still kind of this line that they wanted her to end up with the first guy. It's obvious in a lot of the reviews and a lot of the response to the book. I think when I look back, maybe as an author, you have to tell yourself, okay, there's sometimes when you just write it and maybe you don't care that, it's not selling like you thought it would or that you hope it would. But if you do that time and time again, I think you're going to really struggle as an author. Because let me contrast that against my rom-coms. They like fly off the shelf. You very much have a standard formula that you follow, where this book that we're talking about doesn't. It's not a standard formula. People are confused. I didn't realize that I was doing that. And I kind of regret it, because I think it's such a good book. I wish I could convince more people to read it. But,
Well, okay. So let's talk about that a bit, because, it also depends on how you're trying to sell it. Because if you have a big built-in audience that reads your rom-coms and your contemporary romance, and you kind of expected them to all devour this book, and it's not really their type, then yeah, you could say, okay, well then from that sense, it's not going to do as well. But did you actually try to advertise and market this one aside from your own list, like do ads? You did?
Yes.
You did? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's still
well, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not like a super dud. It's not like I only sold one or something, but it's just this hesitation to read it. My readership I have that, like you said, they read all my rom-coms, they read all my small town romance, really like that. This is a small town romance, just small town just happened to be back in 1855. But you're right. They all seem to hesitate to read it. Oh, I'm not really into the time travel thing. So I thought, okay, we need to find those time travel readers. So I've joined a lot of promotions for time travel. I've gone to Facebook and promoted it on time travel, romance specific. And I still don't feel like I'm getting this breakthrough of people who are like, oh, wow, this is really unique and interesting and I love it. It's more like, yeah, but she didn't end up with the original guy.
Yeah, I think, I think they probably become invested in that first relationship. And then, like, was it like pretty much a half and half? You spent half the book.
No kidding.
Yeah. I think that, that was probably more of your problem than the other. Does your blurb sort of tell people that that's what's going to happen?
Yes.
And then that might be pushing them away as well,
It could be.
And not that you want to necessarily hide it, because
right.
You don't want to get bad reviews, but I think that's going to be part of it as well, right?
Right. Unfortunately, it's
Yeah.
a tough lesson. I mean, you feel like you write a really quality book, and the thing that's against it is it doesn't fit.
Yeah. It's hard to find people for something brand new, because there's so many other things that they already like. They already know they like. It does happen, but I think that if you had instead sort of made that historical part, maybe made her not necessarily fall in love with the guy, but had this connection with them, he helped her out, and they didn't really have a romance, kept it a little bit shorter, and then when she went back to present time and still kept that whole thing of like he passed that on and that's how he met the grandson, and then the romance was between her and the grandson, and then it's like that's how they they got together. I think that would have probably worked a lot better to that sort of a crowd.
Yeah. I mean, hindsight's always perfect, right?
Yeah,
it's better. My editor warned me when he died in the book.
Oh yeah, that's another thing, right?
And I didn't have him die penniless and heartbroken. I mean, it wasn't he married another lady, they had children. I mean, how did this box get passed down, right? He had kids and everything. She said, your readers won't feel a satisfied ending for him. His name is Matthew. But I was determined. I'm like, but this is how it happened. So,
yeah.
I wanted to kind of share this story because I think there's a limit to how pig-headed you want to be, so to speak. I should have listened to her. I could have maybe made it softer, like you said. She met him, he helped her out. I mean, she's stranded in this time frame she knows nothing about. Everybody gets kind of warm and fuzzy feeling from that, but not that she fell in love with him, right? No. But I don't know. At the time, I wanted to write it this way. So I was just going to write it this way. And I did, and learned a hard lesson, I think. I learned a lesson that, yes, you can write what you want to write, but think about, do you want anyone to read that? Or is there a better way to have written it? And I should have thought through it. I should have listened to my editor, for one thing, because she told me his ending is not satisfying.
I think one of the things is when you write genre fiction, there's like a formula for all of them, and it's because I went through the whole thing with you, and now I'm like really strict on the formula. It's like the hero and the heroine have to meet at the end of chapter 1, and it's like whoever that is, that's who she ends up with. And once he lays eyes on her, cannot be with another woman until the end of the book. She has some leeway. She can have break up with her ex-boyfriend or go for the millionaire, but end up with the same guy. But that one guy has to, from that point on, he is straight line. Yeah.
And, I think every author in sort of the back of their mind's like, I'll write something unique and interesting. Or I've seen people post out on Facebook, don't you get tired of these same tropes over and over? How about if somebody wrote a unique trope? Well, okay. Did it? Didn't work.
Yeah, it's always sort of a well, listen, it could have worked. It's just there are parts of, I think, the romance genre that are almost unbreakable, right? The the idea of the HEA and having one person and stuff. I think those were more of the issue than the fact that it was time travel, because time travel romance does well, and if you had written sort of more along the what the time travel romance people expect, then yeah. But it is harder too, because you have that built-in audience that you then can't utilize, and time travel romance is very different than contemporary romance or rom-com. So there will be some overlap, but there's going to be a lot of people that are just like, nah, it's not for me, right?
Right. And they kind of judge it before they read it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I found that. So the other thing I did do was had it made into an audiobook, hoping that, well, maybe I can find my audience there, and slowly chipping away at that. But, I think I have to sort of like say, okay, cut my losses and run, so to speak. That one was not the book I thought was really going to make, a splash. It didn't. It did not. And that teaches you a little bit of a lesson in maybe if you're going to try something different, like Craig said, time travel. Well, yeah, I'd seen Outlander. I'd seen the movie Time Traveler's Wife. Thought I knew all about it. Well, maybe not. The thought that he didn't go back with her, maybe she should have traveled back to him or something. There's the way that they handle it is in Outlander, she goes back and forth, right? Several times, in fact. And
right, but
like that.
But does she have a different lover in each time period, or is she always going back to the one guy?
Well, I think he's the one she really loves.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
There was a very long-running British sitcom where a guy had a portal back to the Second World War, and he had a wife in the Second World War and a wife in the modern day. And he went back and forth between them. But that was not a romance. That was a sitcom.
Ah, gotcha.
Right.
Well, I even thought, well, maybe I can market it as women's fiction or Western fiction. I mean, 1855, they're out in the pioneer days, But then again, it's still like, round peg, square hole to a certain degree. I don't really fit in those either. So anyway, you just thought this might be interesting for other authors to think about. Yes, I don't discourage you to write something unique and interesting, but think about how are you going to get your readers for that? And maybe like Craig said, I could have switched it a little bit and it might have been a big, huge success. Maybe I should rewrite it.
I mean, you can. It's your book. That's the beauty of self-publishing. And you pull it down, change it up. But yeah, I think that there's the other thing there too, is that if you said this was the book you wanted to write, and so it just becomes the idea of, does every book have to make a big profit for it to be satisfying to you as an author? Like maybe you get some personal satisfaction in telling a story that was in your head, and even if that one doesn't in particularly make a huge amount of money, then it's not as big of a deal. It's the idea of writing for to make a living, or writing because you just love to write and it doesn't really matter, right? And I mean, this is your job, but at the same time, maybe not every book has to be, a slam dunk, and that's okay.
True, but I think you are always writing for somebody, right? Maybe not just yourself. And so the dissatisfaction is not as much over the money as having people read it and love it. Having a certain number of readers, you're sharing this story with others. And it's frustrating when you can't find who they are. You kind of bop around and think, okay, maybe this group would like it. I haven't found a clear cut.
Yeah,
for this.
TikTok. Yeah. That is the other sort of aspect of this to think about, is when you write in a different genre than what you're normally writing to, you have to sometimes do things differently than what you're used to doing. And if you don't know what those things are, it would be a big learning curve. And then if you're doing something that's completely different, if you're inventing this new genre or this new thing, how do you find those readers, right? It's at that point, it's very difficult because, you know, if the group doesn't exist, then where do you go? How do you target them? You know, how do you?
Yeah, that's true. But you also have to ask yourself, well, how did some of these ever get started? You know, you always think, could I be the one that did this unique, interesting thing? I see it all the time out on Facebook. Oh, if you could dream up a new trope, what would it be? Okay, well, I dreamed one up, you know, and maybe other authors think, oh, yeah, I can do that too. And they don't really think about, okay, after I've written that, even just figuring out your Kindle categories of all the silly things, right? I have it in Time Terrible. I did. Yeah. And at one point I took it out because I thought, oh, maybe that's hurting it more than helping it. You know, it's kind of like when you switch the cover, right? Oh, well, maybe this cover will be better than that one. But I haven't found the silver bullet, but I still really love the book. I'm not mad I wrote it. I'm just disappointed that I kind of made a mistake as an author. I readily admit that. I should have researched it better or something.
Well, I mean, that's part of the process. What is a writer? A writer is just somebody who has this stubborn gene and they just don't give up. I mean, I wrote 11 full-length books before I had my first bestseller. And I went through the same journey as yours. I started off writing books in which they cheated and I wrote them in third person. And then I stopped with the cheating. And then I tried writing it in first person. And each book did slightly better. And then like there was one book and suddenly it exploded. And I was like, oh, and you have
it.
MMA.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Craig and I met on a message board for writers writing romance, and I started off writing books about MMA fighters, and it was MMA romance. Okay. And it's funny. I had people who liked them, but it was such a small, tiny, specific niche. And then when I did something more general, it was like, oh, I get it now. Like,
right. Well, but when you were doing it, didn't you kind of feel like, this is the stories I want to write? Or what kind of made you change your, mind or whatnot? Money.
Well, it was money, but actually I have to admit, I was writing these MMA books. They weren't going anywhere. And I was kind of like trying to push through. And then when I was like, if I could write any book that was a romance, what would I do? And I had it in my brain. It just like all assembled. I just watched Jurassic Park. Chris Pratt looked great in that. I get Chris Pratt and I get the mum from How I Met Your Mother, the sassy Italian girl. And I put them in Alaska and he'd be a bush pilot and it'd be a bit of a bear. And I wrote that. And then it was, because then it was almost like I'd done a Hollywood movie in my head. And it was so much more, it had so much more general appeal than like specifically MMA fighters. And I got quite into that. And then I was like, oh, it's got more general appeal and it was more successful. People seemed to like it more. I enjoyed writing it more. It had a bear in it. And none of my previous books had a bear in it. So there we go.
That's a good one.
That must have been it. I think, it's a good point too, because, when you first wrote your very first book, did that do well?
Yeah. That one did okay.
Okay, right. So it wasn't a smash it out of the park.
No, it wasn't. I was like Roland, had to write 10 and then finally.
Well, so there you go. So this is almost like starting fresh again, right? Because you've written this thing that isn't an appeal to the audience that you've spent all that time building.
Yeah.
And now, you can't really expect. Now, if you write 10 more of these kind of books, maybe you'd have success. But is that something you want to take a chance on? Probably not.
Right. I would say I don't take a chance on that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, you were saying earlier, like, how do how does these other genres get started? And, I don't know necessarily the answer to that, but we have talked about how self-publishing in general has allowed new genres to flourish, because when traditionally published books were the only thing around, those trad publishers would only take the books that they knew sold really well. They wouldn't take a chance on this totally different genre that nobody ever really did well on before. So, and then with self-publishing, you know, people could publish whatever they want, and then certain books became big and people realized, hey, there is a genre, there is an appetite for that genre, that subgenre, and then all of a sudden everyone starts writing them, and then the traditionally published authors start accepting those kind of books. But you know, it's not, I'm sure, for every one of those that did well, there's lots of them that didn't, or lots of different kind of genre flavors that didn't, right?
There's one, there's BWWM, which is Black Woman, White Man. And that was a genre that didn't exist because traditional publishers were like, oh, who's going to buy these books? And then they self-publish. And now it's a huge genre with, and I've read them just because I like to read books, and some of the authors, as Jamila Jasper, is just a brilliant writer. And it's kind of, it's heartwarming to see self-publishing has allowed this genre to exist, whereas the gatekeepers, traditional publishing, never used to support those kind of books. So there is room for new niches, new genres, new experiences, if you can find what resonates with people, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a good, really good point. Yeah, I think the self-publishing thing, it's interesting. You know, no one's telling you no. I mean, the closest I came, and that was my editor warning me that, well, he dies and she doesn't end up with him. You know, that he didn't have the satisfying love ending.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe.
Yeah, it's true when you say, you know, nobody's telling you no, but in the sense, the readers end up ultimately saying no by not buying it. But
true.
But that's, you know, you gotta take this huge chance before you get that answer. You know, it's
true. And I mean, you pour your heart into these things. It's not like I wrote this book and thought, oh well, I just wrote that. You know, you really put your heart in it, and effort. You know, researching
the research,
and it was a lot of effort. And then it kind of, you know, how you go, okay, and then you know, it sort of fell flat. And I was shocked. I really was, because I thought, oh my gosh, this really great story. And people who have read it, there are fans. In fact, some lady in Australia read it. I don't know her. And she posted on her blog, and oh, it's the best book I've ever read, and So see, it does resonate with some people, but finding enough of them and really feeling like you achieved something, or that your book was, I don't mean to act like I'm money hungry, but I would like people to read my books and enjoy them. And when you can't find those readers, it's kind of a dissatisfying ending to a great book.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the takeaway, I think, is probably, if you're going to do stuff like this, you know, you want to kind of dig into who the audience potentially will be. You know, if there's similar stuff, sort of read a bunch of that stuff and figure out sort of what they do. Figure out how you're going to market it, and maybe do all of that sort of legwork up front, and then decide, is it worth taking the chance? And then you have to also go into it with eyes wide open, knowing that you are taking a chance, and you could fail. And, you know, for somebody who has a built-in audience, you know, sometimes that can help a little bit. Like some of those people, I'm sure some of your fans probably from your previous book probably still read it. So, you know, it's different than when you're just starting out and you tried to write something completely new and you don't have anything, right? So it is a little easier to take a chance when you've built up you know, an audience already. But that's in no means a guarantee of success, I guess, is what we're
I think I overestimated that. You know, people were liking the books I'd written, why would they not like this one? It's of the same tone, the same voice, but I really broke the genre, right? By having her end up with the first guy. I think that was the big mistake.
If it makes you feel any better, just think they just had Indiana Jones 5 come out, and that was, I saw it, I thought it was a really fun movie, and it's a complete box office bomb. And it's like, it doesn't, like, it's a great Indiana Jones movie. It delivers everything you want, and yet people didn't go and see it. So sometimes you can get everything right and still fail.
True. But in that case, my theory is he didn't have a love interest in that movie. You know what I mean? Think about it.
Oh, yeah.
In the very end, the original girl comes back, but anyway, it's what people expect. Isn't that funny? It's just like, I don't know. If Coke changes their recipe, this happened, right? And no one drank it. And yet Coke was this huge giant market, right? It's kind of the same situation, like, whoops.
Yeah, I think that's a problem that a lot of big brands and companies have, where they overestimate, they misinterpret like the love for their product as a love for their company, and it's like, people love Coke, the drink. They don't necessarily love Coke, the company. So when they come out with a different drink, that people aren't like, hey, I love the company so much, I'm going to drink whatever they give. They're like, I love that drink, and now you've changed it, and I'm not happy about that.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that is one of the...
And, the other thing authors probably should think through is, what is your brand? And, is your brand strong enough to really write something that's totally against... It's like swimming against the current, right? And I'm really happy to write what my readers love. That's not the point of this discussion, but just one time I wrote something that was in my head, and I wanted to write it, and it didn't work out.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. You've written it. It exists now. I mean, every other book you write, the more successful those books are, the more people will filter back to your previous books and see it.
True.
And the thing that Craig and I have seen, which is amazing, and you'll see this in news, there was a news story about it just now, is there are suddenly authors whose old books do explode out of nowhere. There was an author, I think he was in his 80s or something, and he was signing books in a Kroger in Texas. And somebody did a little TikTok video, and he was like, I thought more people would be here. I'm kind of disappointed by it. And then tons of people bought his book, and suddenly it became a bestseller. And just because of something completely bizarre, and like one video can make a sudden world of difference. You never know. So it's, I think it's all about putting yourself out there, and maybe the audience does exist. If there are some people who like it, there must be more people who like it. And it's not a question of the book's wrong. It's a question of how can we find the people who would like this book and put it in front of them.
Yeah, I agree, but it's exhausting after a while.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, how much more time and money should I invest in this? Or should I just say, okay, lesson learned, I wish it had done better, but it didn't. And so I'll just, move along and try to give my readers what they really, really want, really, really crave. And it's still fun to write that,
Yeah. And I mean, you could always try to, in future books, tie in some of the characters to some of the characters over there, so that people that end up reading those other ones and really liking it will want to read sort of like their origin story, like maybe I don't know, she has a kid with this other guy, and then they want to hear about her her parents talk about this weird experience they had, and how they met, and they want, people want to read that story, and they'll go back and read it. You never know. But I do agree that at some point you have to, cut your losses and accept defeat. And, it doesn't have to be forever. You might one day find that books like that are all of a sudden all the rage. And then you can try and market it again, right?
Exactly.
As the OG.
Yeah. Don't lose sight of that. But
Right.
I do reflect back and think, now what if that was my first book?
Right.
It might have been too discouraging to continue. So, maybe authors who are just starting out need to think about what'll help you feel good about what you've done, and you're not climbing up this steep hill.
Yeah, and I think that, that's an important point to think about in terms of, you have all this experience, so you can look at this stuff and say, okay, well, I know I'm successful doing these other ones, so I can walk away from this and not feel discouraged and give up writing. But I think the other thing that you're doing that's important is the self-reflection about what it was that made it not work.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you discover those things, when you figure those things out, you can realize that if you change those things, your next one would be successful. So if you were to write another one, maybe it would be you would change those things that people didn't like. You wouldn't have the 2 romances. You wouldn't, so maybe it wouldn't discourage you. So if people are doing something like this, trying something new, and it doesn't work, it is always important to reflect on why it didn't work. Look at the reader, look at the reviews, look at the comments from your editors or your beta readers or whatever, and try to figure out, was there something, that you did wrong that you could fix, that you could learn from, or was it that, you just are a terrible writer, which is probably not, it's not for you, but I'm saying as a new writer, that's what's going to be in their head, is like, I failed, so I'm a terrible writer, right? But it's not always that. It could be all these other, you could have just done a few things wrong. And your biggest thing is, romance readers really do want that one love, this, one person, they fall in love, they, blah, blah, blah. And then you sort of did 2 and not an HEA for the one guy and stuff. So you broke some of the key rules. And I think that over everything else was probably one of the biggest contributing factors to people not connecting with it. And so if people went and had that same experience and they identify things like that, hopefully that would teach them that, don't give up, just fix those things and then try again.
Right. No, good point. Yeah, I just feel like if it had been my first book, I might have quit.
Yeah.
It's good to have some success early on. That keeps you going. Writing's tough. It's not a job that, like you own a bakery and everybody loves your cupcakes. It's tough. You have to come up with a story. You have to write it down. It's a hard job in my mind. And then after you've done all that, blood, sweat, and tears for this book, you put it out there and then you get a snarky review. Ooh, ouch, right? You have to be willing to live with all that. Or you get wonderful, great readers. There's the opposite end of the spectrum. And they write you to say, please write another one, or I just love this one. Those are the people that keep you going.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And even sometimes it's just like one reader can make the difference.
Exactly. That's true. I have to tell this story real quick. I had a 13-year-old girl reach out to me on one of my rom-coms. And I'm not really targeting that age group, but they're clean and wholesome. And she told me how much she loved that book. And wow, what a difference that made in my day, in my week. Because I was like, you know what? I did not expect that age to read it, for one thing. And for her to have the gumption to reach out and tell me how much she loved it, it was just a wonderful thing,
For sure. One glowing, happy review can really, really brighten your week even.
Right. So don't give up.
Don't give up. You know what? Unfortunately, we are coming up to the top of the hour, so we have to wrap things up. But what a wonderful message to have. Don't give up. And that's true. Everyone says it. Like the writers who are successful just keep writing. Only HarperCollins ever became famous with one book.
Right.
Harper Lee, sorry. Not HarperCollins. HarperCollins is a publisher.
Yeah,
that's right. HarperCollins most definitely had more than one book to become successful.
Yes.
But thank you so much. Now, okay, so hopefully people have been listening to this and they're kind of interested in your time traveling romance. Where can they find it?
Okay, well, that wasn't my intention, just to try to get the thing to sell. But the title is Forever You, and it's available on Amazon. You can just look for it there. And if you read it, reach out to me. I'd love to know what you thought. But be forewarned. It may not end how you wanted it to.
Well, everyone's been forewarned now, haven't they?
They have.
Well, that's wonderful. We'll pop a link down below for definite. And Craig, before we wrap things up, do you have any final thoughts or questions or comments? Or
I think this is, a really good sort of lesson to sort of give to other authors, especially people that are just starting out or people that are thinking about branching out, is all these things that you want to think about, and you want to go into it knowing, what the possible outcomes are. And just because you have a built-in audience doesn't mean they're necessarily going to just buy everything you write. But, if you pay attention to sort of, what goes into the genre and the kind of things, the do's and don'ts of the specific genre that you write in, you'll give yourself more of a chance of success at least. But doesn't mean you can't try different things. You never know what'll happen, but you just have to be prepared to fail, and that's okay, right? Especially if you know that you're a good writer, that you can sell books, and then you do something like this, definitely don't let it discourage you. And if you don't already know that because you're new or whatever, and you try something new or try something and it doesn't work, that also doesn't necessarily mean be discouraged and give up. Look into it, see if you can figure out why it didn't work, and then maybe try something different next time. So.
Yeah, good message. I mean, every author thinks about what if I write, like next time, what if I try to write a Regency romance? I don't know if I could just sit down and write one of those. So you're exactly right. It requires some research, and then also to figure out, is that a really popular genre right now? Or, because writing takes time, and if you're going to pour 3 months into something, you want to probably feel like it was worth it.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. Yeah. Anyway, well, Leah, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. This has been I think a lot of people will think this is a really valuable and interesting conversation, because I think there are a lot of people who've probably been in this boat or are in this boat. And so it's kind of nice to hear other people talking about it. So thank you so much for sharing your frustrations.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
And if you are listening to this or watching on YouTube and you appreciate what Leah has had to say, then make sure you scroll down and leave a comment down below and give us some love. And while you're down there, there's a subscribe button. If you haven't clicked that yet, make sure you do. There's a little bell icon, which means you get notified every time we have a new episode. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Fully Booked. So until then, thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.